Hi guys, and welcome back to another video for Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. In today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different, so we're going to just take a quick pause on the weapon guides for this week and we're going to come back to those next week. So the reason for today's video is there's been quite a lot of discourse recently particularly over the last few weeks regarding NGS. Quite a lot of complaints that I've seen going around regarding particularly the drop rates for some of the rare items in PSO2 NGS. So the purpose of today's video is I just want to have a look into this and basically just break it down and look at it from the perspective of someone who's played Phantasy Star Online for a long time. I'm just going to go into sort of what the current problem that people are perceiving is and how it compares to some of the previous games and series as well, just so people can see a current opinion of what the actual problem is and whether it is actually a problem or whether it's just something that needs to be changed with NGS. So first section we're going to look at is what the current issue is with the NGS drop rates. So the main concern that I've seen about these drop rates in NGS is for the rarest things in the game. So currently that's things like the Tisa weapons, the Octo Armors, and some of the capsules as well. It's mainly for those items, but it goes back as far as when the relic weapons were first added. So when the relic weapons were first added, the drop rates were much more difficult than every other weapon in the game, and there was a lot of complaints that they were quote unquote impossible to get. Over the next few months then Sega added various other ways of getting them and made them a lot more obtainable. And the same kind of thing is happening now with the Tisa weapons. It also happened to an extent with the Gunblaze series as well. A lot of people complained when Dryzen Plant was added that the Gunblaze weapons were nearly impossible to get. So that's the sort of current issue, and I've heard a lot of people saying that it's almost pointless hunting for the Tisa weapons because they're just impossible to find. And a lot of people are complaining about it and saying that Sega needs to change it. So that's sort of the purpose of this video really, just to look into what this problem is and is this new for Phantasy Star? So what we need to do next is we need to look and see if this is new for the Phantasy Star series, and to do that we need to go back and look at the other Phantasy Star Online games. We can ignore the original Phantasy Star games because they were more traditional JRPGs, more akin to something like Final Fantasy that was a single player RPG. So we want to be looking particularly from PSO onwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of the previous Phantasy Star games and just show you how some of the rare drops worked and if exceedingly rare items is a new thing or not. Just to spoil it, it isn't. It's nothing new at all. So we'll go back to the original PSO first and we'll look at that. Then we'll move on to games like PSU, and I might also briefly cover some of the portable games and maybe original PSO2 as well. So first of all, my background in Phantasy Star Online. I started with the series in about 2003 with the GameCube version of the original PSO. Since then I've played through GameCube PSO, I've played Blueburst, I've played PSU, the expansion for PSU, all of the portable games, as in Portable, Portable 2 and Portable 2 Infinity. Played the Japanese alpha onwards of PSO2, and I'm now playing NGS as well. I haven't played Nova or any of the smartphone games really. So I've got quite a lot of experience with PSO, and since then I have also gone back and bought a Dreamcast and played the original PSO as well. So like particularly version 2, not so much version 1, but I have played version 2. So what I'm going to do next is, using that sort of experience I've got from the original PSO, going back to the 2003, I've got a very good idea of what the rare drops were like in those games going forward. So I can give a kind of a fair opinion of how things have changed over the years and whether this problem with rares being too hard to get is a new thing or not. So firstly, we're going to look at PSO in all of its incarnations. So this will cover Dreamcast version 1, Dreamcast version 2, PC version 2, GameCube, Xbox, and Blueburst as well. So basically everything that's connected to the original Phantasy Star Online. So if we first look back at the original PSO, rare drops were a major thing with PSO. So in my eyes, PSO in all of its incarnations has always been kind of like a looter RPG. So it's always been heavily focused around hunting rares, trying to find the best gear, and grinding for the rare stuff. And that's been a case since the original Phantasy Star Online. It has lessened a little bit in more recent games, such as NGS, but the original PSO in particular was absolutely notorious for its drop rates. So this problem with overly rare items in NGS is nothing new at all. It's been going on for over 20 years. Just to help accentuate that, I've actually got a couple of examples of how bad some of the drop rates were. I appreciate, as I was sort of putting this video together, I came to the realization that a lot of people who play NGS maybe haven't played the original PSO. I am aware it is over 20 years old now. So they may not be aware of how bad things were in the original PSO if they're trying to find some of the rares. So what I've done is I've prepared a couple of examples just so people who have maybe not played PSO before have got a good idea of just how rare some of the items were in that game. So first example we're going to look at is the 1975 Agito, which was like a rare katana. So if we look at the, for example, the Dreamcast drop rates for it. So if I just pull these up now for you. So these are the drop rates for the 1975 Agito on Dreamcast. This I think this covers version 1 and maybe version 2 as well. And you can see these are the real drop rates. So for example, you've got from a very hard ruins Chaosbringer at 1 in 866,592. There's a couple that are over 1 million, and then you've got one which I don't even know if this is real. Like, someone who's maybe played Dreamcast more can maybe enlighten me on this, but if this is true, then this drop rate is 1 in 137,659,209. Which is absolutely ludicrous. Like, you are never going to find this. Ever. Now, you'd be happy to know that they did actually improve it. So, if you go to the version 3 of the game, which was GameCube and Xbox, these are much easier. Much easier. So, look, it's a 1 in 22 drop. The problem is it's from a rare enemy, which was a 1 in 512 chance of appearing. So, it's actually 1 in 512 times by 1 in 22. So I believe you're looking at around roughly about a 100,000 drop rate. I haven't done the maths, but it's around there. You can see you've got plenty of other drops that are around sort of 1 in 20,000 to 1 in 30,000. These would be from enemies that were fairly easy to hunt, but 1 in 28,000 is a very difficult drop rate. Now, back in the day, these were what I would describe as huntable rares. You would typically have these at endgame, and you would focus a lot of time to going after them. The kind of way that you used to play PSO back in the day was that once you got into Ultimate, which was the final difficulty, you would typically have an item in mind that you wanted to go for. Quite often you will have built your character around it to make sure you had the best section ID to go after that item. And you would essentially just log on and just like rinse and repeat hunt the same enemies over and over again. So for example, for the 1975 Agito, one of the best drops for this, if you were ignoring the rare enemies, was probably this Viridia or Blue Full drop, or Yellow Bows, which is from a Tolor, which was an enemy in the first zone of the game. And it's a 1 in 28,800 drop, but there was a quest that had a lot of Tolors in it, so you would just spam that quest over and over again. It was called Lost Heat Sword. You just used to spam that quest over and over again and hope you got a 1 in 28,000 drop. But the good news is it was a very spammable quest, and Tolors are quite an easy enemy to kill, so you could kill a lot of them in a short space of time. So it was actually kind of huntable. I mean, I know a couple of people who did find 1 in 28,000 drops. So that's 1975 Agito. So next, if we move on to, let's see, so there is a weapon called Sanga Inyasha, which is a twin sword. It's basically a katana in each hand. And the way you used to get this in PSO is it didn't drop as a single weapon, so it's not like NGS where your sword and blades drop as a single weapon. With Sanga Inyasha and a couple of others, you used to have to find the individual swords and then combine them together. So you used to have to find Sanga separately and Yasha separately. Now Sanga was really not that bad at all. It was quite a simple hunt. So you can see here, you can get it as a 1 in 2 drop from a rare enemy. So Middle Lily was a rare monster, so 1 in 512 times by 1 in 2. Or you could get it from Palms at 1 in 350. They were kind of like an uncommon enemy. Typically, you would just hunt it from the rare lily because you could, again, get quests with a lot of lilies in and quickly find them. So Sanga was no problem at all. The first problem, though, with getting a good Sanga and Yasha was finding Yasha. So Yasha, you could only get it from 2 out of 10 of the section IDs in the game. If you didn't have these section IDs, you couldn't find it. You'd have to get someone else with that section ID to help you make a game. And you can see both of the drops are absolutely terrible. You've got, so the Skylight drop is from Indie Belarus in Temple, and that was 1 in 28,808. Indie Belarus in a typical run, you'd maybe get 3 or 4 in a whole run, and they'd be right at the end. There were quests that would have a few more of them, but they were quite an uncommon enemy, so it's not a brilliant drop rate. The only other option you had is from a Milkweek from Viridia Caves, and that was 1 in 67,200. Now, Milkweeks were... They're sort of an equivalent kind of enemy to the Tolors that we looked at previously, so they're spawned relatively commonly, and there were quests where you can get a lot of them, but 1 in 67,000 rate, it's horrendous. You'd have to be incredibly lucky to find it. I actually, in Blueburst, I actually managed to find this drop from the Milkweeks, but I got it when they had an event on that doubled the drop rates, so it was only 1 in 33,000 when I found it, only. So, let's say you get super lucky and you find Yasha. Great. Problem is now, you don't want to waste a bad Sanga on that Yasha, because you want to make a really good Sanga and Yasha, bearing in mind how rare Yasha was. So now what you want to do is you want to get a Sanga that has the hit percentage to have more accuracy, which will give your Sanga and Yasha more accuracy. So the chance of getting a weapon with hit in PSO in episode 1, which is where you got Sanga from, was 5% in Ultimate. So you had a 5% chance of that 1 in 2 drop from a 1 in 512 rare enemy of having hit. And that's for just having hit. You could get all that, get a Sanga that has a hit percentage on it, and then it may only be a very low percentage. So you think, well, I don't really want to use that on that super rare Yasha I've found, so I guess I'll hunt another one. So you can see how hard this becomes to get a really good Sanga and Yasha. Just a couple more options before we move on to PSU. So next one is, this is absolutely infamous, this weapon. So there is a weapon in PSO called the Sealed J Sword. In later games it appeared as the Sealed Nodachi. And this weapon, in PSO, it was only findable by one section ID, Skylight, best ID. You could only get it from that ID, meaning that if you had any other section ID, you would have to get someone with a Skylight character to make all your games for you, or you'd have to make your own Skylight character. And it only dropped from one monster, Gigu, which was a mini boss, and it was a 1 in 12,500 drop. Now, particularly if you weren't playing online at this point, if you were an offline only player in GameCube or Xbox, the only way you could get a Gigu to appear was by doing a seaside run. And at the end of Seaside, you would get one Gigu as the boss at the end, and that was it. So if you were offline, you had to run the whole of Seaside to get one boss that has a 1 in 12,500 drop chance of the Sealed J Sword. Online, it was a little bit easier. Not particularly. There were quests that had a few Gigus, so there was a quest called Phantasy World 4, where you could run a couple of floors of this tower, and I think it was in 2 floors, you could get about 5 Gigu, and then you would just reset and run that over and over again. But even then, it was only 5 chances at 1 in 12,500. It was obscenely hard to get. And then, just for a laugh, the final one I'll show you for PSO is the Psycho Wand. So, Psycho Wand, obviously, it's an absolutely legendary weapon in Phantasy Star. It's been in pretty much every game. So, in version 1 on Dreamcast, your only options to get Psycho Wand I should note as well that all of these drop rates I'm showing you, they're all pulled from PSO World. So shout out to them and go and check them out if you need any sort of Phantasy Star news, particularly for the older games. Unfortunately, it's not really updated much now, but for the older games, there is still a lot of information over there. So for version 1, Dreamcast and PC, for the Psycho ones, your only drops are, they're both from Very Hard Ruins Chaos Sorcerers, and they're both nearly 1 in 1.5 million. And that's your only choices of getting it. I think these might be version 1 Dreamcast rates. So in version 3, so GameCube and Xbox, they expanded it so every section ID could find Psycho Wand. Brilliant. That's going to make it easy to get then, isn't it? No. So there is still no easy way of getting it. And to be honest, although the drop rates are better in version 3, they're still almost impossible. So you can see there's one standout rate here, which is this purple num one, which is 1 in 205, but it's from a Middle League end, which again is that rare enemy. So it's 1 in 512 chance of a rare enemy times by 1 in 205 to get the Psycho Wand. There are also ones like this Oran Gibbles at 1 in 12,600. Gibbles is sort of equivalent to Gugu that drops the CLJ sword, so he's a mini boss. So again, if you were offline, you would only get 1 per run. And you can see a lot of the other rates are like well into the 1 in 200,000s. It's obscenely hard to get. I cannot stress how impossible some of the drops were to get in PSO. Just for some context, the CLJ sword that I mentioned, I hunted that across GameCube and Blue Burst for about 4.5 years, and I never found it. So that's one reason I kind of find it funny with this discourse with NGS, because if you look back, this is not a new thing with really high drop rates. Impossible drops have been a thing since the original PSO. So next up, we're going to look at Phantasy Star Universe. Now, unfortunately, from PSU onwards, we don't have any actual drop rates. The only reason we had them for PSO is because people data mine the game. But for PSU onwards, a lot of the data was saved server-side, so we don't actually have access to the actual drop rates. However, I can still sort of give a brief overview of how things worked. So in PSU, a lot of the weapons in PSU, the way it would work is you would find what was called a synthesis board, and you would give that to your partner machine, which is like a mag that would make things for you. And you would give them the board, and then you would give them a few ingredient items that the board required, and then they would synthesize that item for you. The problem is that they were not guaranteed success rates. So you could find a super rare board, give all the materials, some of which of the materials might be very rare as well, and then your partner machine might fail the synthesis and just give you junk. And the problem is it wastes the board when you either succeed or fail a synthesis. So you would then have to go back and then find another board again. So again, there was a couple of infamous ones. So the main one, when I used to play PSU, was there was a sword called Agato Replica. And it was a 12-star sword. And the board for that was incredibly hard to find. It was like an area drop in one of the areas. So basically, in one of the areas in the game, any enemy in that area could drop it, but it was a super low chance of getting it. Then also needed these items called Agito Edges, which were fairly rare as well. And then you synthesize it, and you basically have to cross your fingers and hope that it worked. Then, assuming it even worked, Sega then played the ultimate dick move with the Agito, which was when you get it, it was super weak, and you had to grind it to make it stronger. Now, unfortunately, the way the grinding worked in PSU was incredibly punishing. You think you've got it bad in NGS now, the way that grinding happened in PSU was brutal. So in base game PSU, every time you grinded a weapon, once you got to a certain point, there was a chance that you could fail the grind. Now, in base game PSO2, if you fail a grind, you might lose a couple of grinds in the weapon at worst. In PSU, in base game PSU at least, if you failed a grind on a weapon, it destroyed your weapon. So that super rare Agito that you've just spent probably hundreds of hours trying to find, you've been lucky enough to get the synthesis to work, you then blow it up grinding before it becomes strong enough to be useful. Now, in the expansion for PS2, they did change how the grinding worked. So if you failed to grind, what it would do is it would reduce the maximum grind level of that weapon. So all weapons in PSU could grind to 10. So what it would do is, if you fail to grind, it would drop the maximum grind to 9. So then you could only take that Agito up to 9 out of 10. You couldn't get it to 10 out of 10 anymore. If you failed another one, it'd go to 8, and 7, 6, 5, etc. So what it meant is that it affected the resale values in particular. So if you wanted to then sell on that sword, if it had like missing grinds because you'd failed a couple of grinds on it, it would massively tank the value of the weapon. So it was absolutely brutal. It was definitely better than losing the weapon altogether, but it was still pretty nasty. So that was kind of how PSU worked. And again, there was a wide variety of things you could hunt. And the drop rates did vary quite a lot for things. Again, we didn't have the exact drop rates available to us, but after you'd done a few hunts, you could get an idea of what was more common and what was rarer. So that's a rough idea of how PSU handled the drops. So just very quickly, I'm just going to very briefly cover some of the other Phantasy Star games. So in the portable games, particularly Portable 2 and Infinity, they got rid of the synthesis system, and I'm pretty sure everything just dropped as a pre-made weapon. So that was great. Now, in Infinity did a lot of things really, really well. The only sort of criticism I would have regarding the drop rates in Infinity was that some stuff was almost too common. So there were items that you would get over and over and over and over again. That was a problem in original PSO to an extent as well. You know, as a Skylight, you would get things like Dragon Slayers all the time in Ultimate. But it felt a bit like that you were getting too many rares, and it almost devalued the rares for me a bit in Infinity. But generally, I think the balance in those games was pretty good overall. There were some weapons that were extremely hard to get. There were some weapons that were a lot more common, and then there was a nice middle ground as well. And that's kind of what I'd like to see, to be honest, going forward in NGS. If we go forward to PSO2, PSO2, again, I think you had a reasonable balance of easy to get rares and rarer items. But the problem that PSO2 has, which is also a problem that I feel that NGS has, is because it's essentially a live service game with updates every so often, you can't have sort of what I would describe as endgame gear, because the endgame is always going to change. So because of that, anything that you would hunt in original PSO2, and also the same in NGS as well, within a few months it's probably going to be outdated. Now it does keep the game refreshing to an extent, because it means you've always got something else to work towards, but it also means that it kind of cheapens the appeal of hunting anything, because you know that even if you find it, it's going to be, you know, defunct in a couple of months anyway. So next, I'm just going to quickly talk about what I see the problem is in NGS at the moment. So the problem I see with NGS at the moment regarding the drop rates is it's not so much that things are too rare. It's that, for me, it's that there's not enough variety in things to actually hunt. So at the moment, as of the time of the recording, really the only things that are things you would hunt would be any of the Tisa weapons, maybe Octo Armors, and potentially a couple of capsules, and that would be about it. There isn't a great deal of things that you would bother hunting. Maybe some of the Verschmelz weapons as well, but for those you don't even need to hunt them, you can just get them through the Growthment Exchange shop. So that's one problem. I feel NGS has a problem where there isn't enough spread of rares, so you seem to have things that you get all the time. You know, so you'll constantly get things in rewards, like the Resurgia weapons and things like that. You know, sort of 4, 5, 6, 7-star weapons, potentially. You're going to get them quite often. And you've also got the uber rare end, which is the Tisas and Octo variants and things like that. But there isn't much of an actual middle ground, so I feel like NGS needs to add a few more weapons into that middle ground, just things that are attainable, but maybe slightly under the rarest gear, just so you've got a few options. So you know you can hunt the rarest things in the game, but you might also have a chance of getting this other item as well. I think that would be a good start. So I think that's one of the problems NGS has that I would like to see change over time. But as I've said, it's quite difficult with it being a live service game, because the meta, so to speak, is always going to change every couple of months. Another thing I would like to see is I would like to see more distinct abilities for some of the rares. So if you go back to things like PSO, a lot of the weapons had what I can only describe as a bit of character to them. So as an example, you had items like the Yamigarasu. So Yamigarasu was a katana. It had like an instant kill special that would work on some enemies and not on others. But it was meant to be a cursed katana. So to play on that, they made it so it would drain your health slowly over time, and it would also randomly inflict confuse on you as well. There were other weapons as well with similar sort of kind of abilities to them that just give them a little bit more personality. So there was even really strange ones. So you had things like the dancing Hitagata, which was a weapon that you could make, and it was essentially these little paper dolls. And instead of just throwing them like you did with every other card weapon, they would just circle around your character, and when you attacked, they would just shoot off in the direction they faced. It was a bit of a meme weapon, to be honest, but it was kind of cool because it was unique, and I kind of missed that in NGS. So I feel in NGS, a lot of the weapons are kind of quite bland, and they don't really have much that makes them stand out. There's been a little bit of a move on that recently, so you do have things like the Verschmelt weapons with their very unique potential with the 100% crit rate. But I would like to see weapons with a little bit more personality to like their abilities and their potentials. We are getting there slowly, I think, but I would like to see a bit more movement on that. And I think then that would maybe encourage people to hunt things a bit more. So I do feel like there is a problem with rare drops in NGS, but I don't think it's what people have been saying. I don't think it's a problem with the actual drop rates. Yes, the stuff like the Tisa weapons are incredibly hard to get, and they are, to all extent, unobtainable. You may get one luckily when you're not looking for it, but generally they're not just going to show up when you hunt them, just because they do seem to be very, very rare. But I don't see that as the actual problem. I see the problem is that there isn't many other options available to use. Realistically, if you're not using Tisa at the minute, you're going to be using either Verschmelts or Neosastrain, and that's about it. Maybe the new seasonal weapons as well, which I can't remember the name of. Apart from those, there's not many other options for weapons that you're going to really be using at the current quote-unquote end game of the game. And I think that's the problem. I think there needs to be a lot more variety in the gear available. So I think that's probably going to do it for this video, because I feel like I've rambled on for a while. Basically, the point of this was that I just wanted to show people who've maybe not played PSO before and the earlier games that having rare items in the game that are incredibly rare is not a new thing for Phantasy Star Online. It's not new. It's not a new thing in NGS. It's been going back as far as the original PSO. The difference was, though, that in those games you did have a lot more options for things to hunt. So it didn't feel like as much of a problem. You appreciated that these uber rare items were things that you were probably not going to get, but it was something to do and something to hunt, and you could improve your other gear while you were doing it. Whereas I feel that's kind of lost in the newer games, and I feel like that's why people are seeing it as a problem, because they can't get these uber rare items, but there's not really many other options to use apart from what everyone else is using. So I feel like that's more the problem with NGS at the moment, and I would like to see that change over time. But yeah, I just wanted to give my perspective as someone who's played Phantasy Star since going back to 2003 with GameCube PSO. I realise a lot of people who play NGS just probably haven't played the original PSO because of how old it is now, and I just wanted to sort of put this out there just so, for like an educational thing really, just so anyone who hasn't played the original PSO can get an idea of what it was like. So I have spliced some footage in during this video, which is all footage I've recorded of PSO Blueburst and PSU as well. They were both recorded on private servers because the game's official servers have gone down a long time ago. If you do want information on how to play PSO BB or PSU, I will leave some links in the comments, links in the description as well, to links to sign up for those private servers. It's Ephinea server for PSO BB and Clementine server for PSU. So any questions at all, leave them in the comments. I realise this might be a sort of a bigger discussion topic with different opinions, but feel free to leave your opinions in the comments. I will try and answer what I can. Next week, we're going to get back to the weapon guides. Some point during the week or next weekend, I'm going to record the next one, which will probably be for Knuckles or Twin Machine Gun. And then we'll get back to finishing those off, and then we'll do some more NGS videos after that. Let me know as well in the comments if you're interested in seeing some more videos about all the Phantasy Star games. So I'm talking sort of from PSO onwards. So if you're interested in seeing any videos regarding the original PSO or PSU, or even things like the portable games as well, just let me know in the comments, and I will try and sort of cater to you and do what I can. So I'll end this video there. Any comments, leave them in the comments below. And for the meantime, I will see you guys in the next video.